Software can look innocent. A clean dashboard, a confident recommendation, a risk score dressed in 2 decimal places whispering certainty into the room. But in validation, beauty is not proof. A polished interface can hide weak requirements. A flawless report can carry an unsupported claim. A silent failure can sit there, elegant and dangerous. This module takes away the illusion. We are not here to admire software. We are here to interrogate it. I'm Dr. Auberal Burchard, Chief Medical Officer at NeuroNova, and in a little while, I'll bring you closer to NeuroDose, our medical software. Actually, let me check perhaps with Kurt, our Product Management Director. If I can pull him away from his timelines long enough, he could talk to you about it. But first, let us talk about validation. The discipline that decides whether software intended as a medical device is merely impressive, or whether it can be trusted when a patient's life may depend on the answer. Welcome to NeuroNova. Look at it. This is choreography, intended use, risk, requirements, controls. 4 arrows. Simple. Almost seductive in how clean it looks. But do not be fooled by clean design. This is not decoration. This is the beginning of the entire validation argument. The slide says, this course is not a standards reading exercise. And that matters. We are not here to memorize clauses like obedient little monks. We are here to learn how a regulated organization proves that software as a medical device can be trusted for its medical purpose. Intended use comes first because it gives the software its identity. What is it for? Who uses it? Which patients? Which clinical decision? Then, risk enters the room. Risk asks the questions polite teams avoid. What could go wrong? What could mislead the user? What could reach the patient? Then, requirements. This is where intention becomes obligation. Not wishes, not vague user stories. Controlled, testable statements. And then, controls. Controls are where safety becomes real. Data checks, warnings, limits, access rules, audit trails, clinical safeguards. Later, we will follow this into testing, release, change control, post-market monitoring, but here, discipline begins. Every module asks, what evidence is expected? Who owns it? And how is it traced? That is the difference between paperwork and controlled proof. I love those beautiful slides Aidan created for us. He's such a sweetheart. He even used my colours. I am going to make you meet him later. Meanwhile, let's go ahead, shall we? What you are looking at now is a sirograph. A defensible software as a medical device validation file is not a pile of documents. A pile is what you create when everyone is busy and nobody is thinking. A validation file is a story. A controlled, traceable, uncomfortable story. About how a medical purpose becomes software behavior and how that behavior is proven safe enough for use. Start on the left. User and patient context. Who uses the software? A neurologist? A nurse? A patient at home? A caregiver at midnight with poor Wi-Fi and anxiety in the room? Those are not soft details. They shape usability, risk, labeling, training, workflow validation, and clinical evidence. Then the data enters. Sensor data, lab values, EHR data, images, diaries, patient-reported symptoms. Data has a personality. It arrives late. It arrives incomplete. It wears the wrong unit. It belongs to the wrong patient. It is biased by the population that generated it. If the data is weak, the output may look elegant and still be dangerous. Then processing logic. Rules, calculations, statistical models, AI, classifications, thresholds. This is where teams become too impressed with themselves. The algorithm may be brilliant, but brilliance is not validation. The question is whether its behavior is defined, controlled, verified, clinically meaningful, and monitored. Then the output. Alert, recommendation, score, report, trend, clinical signal. But the output is not the end. The user interprets it. The user acts, or does not act. That is where patient risk lives. So when an auditor follows this slide, they are not browsing. They are hunting for coherence. Intended use to data, data to logic, logic to output, output to user action, action to risk control to evidence. If that trail is broken, the file is not mature.
Am I boring you already? Good, that means the theory is beginning to touch the part of the mind that resists being improved. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a small mercy. We will step away from the regulatory anatomy for a moment, and I'm going to send you to Kurt. Kurt has a particular gift. He can describe our product as if it just pulled up outside in a very expensive car and asked whether you believe in destiny. He will introduce you properly to NeuroDose and why everyone at NeuroNova has become very pleased with themselves. Enjoy him.
Well, hello there, beautiful people. Kurt Hatcher, Product Management Director. Current reason this room has a pulse. Now, Dr. Burchard sent you to me because she is wise. She understands that sometimes the audience needs less regulatory candlelight and more champagne over the dashboard. So let me introduce you to NeuroDose. NeuroDose is not an app. Please do not insult it. NeuroDose is what happens when NeuroNova takes Parkinson's therapy off a mission, adds clinical intellification, movement data, symptom patterns, wearable sensors, medication timing, machine learning, and just enough ambition to make ordinarily software feel underdressed. It looks at tremor variability, gait instability, bradykinesia trends, dyskinesia episodes, many other fancy body things, wearing off periods, on and off medication states. And then it turns all of that beautiful clinical chaos into something a specialist can actually use. Trend summaries, therapy response profiles, symptom fluctuation maps, data quality indicators, confidence scores, suggest areas for clinical attention, elegant, controlled, expensive looking. Because frankly, it should be. Now, tiny legal footnote before regulatory starts breathing into a paper bag. NeuroDose does not replace the clinician. It does not prescribe medication. It does not run into the room and change therapy by itself. It supports clinical judgment, which is actually better, because the best software does not steal the doctor's authority. It makes the doctor look terrifyingly well-informed. And that, my friends, is NeuroDose, designed by NeuroNova, introduced by me. You are welcome. And if you speak to Aiden or Robin, smile politely and let them worry. It is what they do. Just ignore them. Because NeuroDose is not almost ready. It is ready. Ready, standing at the finish line with perfect hair, ready. Just like me.
I believe we have all survived the product enthusiasm. Now, let us come back to the discipline of this course. First, I want us to understand the theory properly. Later, we will show you how that theory becomes a validation approach for NeuroDose. So, are you ready?
This is where people become quiet. Because medical software can fail beautifully. A physical device often betrays itself. It leaks, it alarms. It makes a noise that tells the room something has happened. Software is more discreet. It can be wrong with perfect formatting. It can calculate incorrectly with a clean dashboard. It can miss an alert and leave no dramatic scene behind. That is the danger of silent failure. Look at the left side of the slide, what the user sees. A polished dashboard, formatted report, confident alert. A recommendation that appears calm, professional, and inevitable. Humans are vulnerable to that. Automation bias is not a theoretical phrase. It means the user may trust the system because the system looks like it knows what it is doing. Now look at what must support that surface. Intended use and risk. Data and logic controls. Verification and validation. Release and monitoring. This is the hidden structure under the beautiful interface. The failure categories are the real lesson. Incorrect output, missing output, delayed output, misleading output, data quality failure, security failure, change failure. These are not merely software defects, but possible clinical events in disguise. A wrong unit can become a wrong decision. A late cloud response can become a missed intervention. A model update can change clinical behavior while everyone still thinks they are using the same product. And do not be comforted by the absence of complaints. Silence after release may mean safety, or it may mean the users never detected the failure. Trust is an evidence chain strong enough to survive silence. Regulatory maps are often treated like wallpaper. FDA here, EU MDR there, IMDRF in the corner, standards arranged neatly like expensive books nobody intends to open. But that is not what this slide is doing. This slide is asking a very intimate question about the software. What are you, really? Because validation strategy cannot be finalized until the category is known. Not the category we prefer, not the category that makes the timeline look elegant, the real one. On the left, we have the regulatory ecosystem. FDA with device software functions, QMSR, CDS, cybersecurity, and CSA. Europe with NDR, NDCG, GSPRs, and Rule 11. IMDRF, giving us the language of SAMD, risk, quality systems, clinical evaluation, and software-specific risk. Then the standards. ISO 13485, ISO 14971, IEC 62304, IEC 82304-1, IEC 62366-1, IEC 81001-5-1. Beautiful names. Dangerous names if used carelessly. Now look to the right. This is the decision tree. It begins where everything must begin. Intended medical purpose. If the software has a medical purpose, we assess SAMD or SIMD obligations. If it controls hardware, the conversation changes. If it supports QMS, production, or regulated records, we think CSA, CSV, and tool assurance. If cloud, SOUP, or third parties are involved, we bring in supplier control, cybersecurity, configuration, and integration risk. And then the final question. Can the function or claim change over time? That one is delicious. Because sometimes the software does not change. Only the sentence changes. And suddenly the regulatory pathway moves under your feet. So remember the warning at the bottom. References are not jewelry. Standards are not decorations. They must become procedures, records, reviews, and release decisions. A validation file does not become stronger because it cites more things. It becomes stronger when the team can explain exactly which source applies to which decision.
We are nearly there, but before we continue, I have our regulatory conscience here with me, the man who can change an entire project with one quiet sentence. He is going to give you a brief regulatory view of NeuroDose. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our Director of Regulatory Affairs, the magnificent Sheris Westman.
Let us remove the romance for a moment. NeuroDose. It is regulated. NeuroDose is clinician-facing medical software designed to help review therapy response in patients with Parkinson's disease. The software processes patient-specific health data using algorithmic and machine learning methods to identify patterns that may be clinically relevant. These insights are presented to clinicians through trend summaries, therapy response profiles, symptom fluctuation maps, data quality indicators, confidence scores, and suggested areas for clinical attention. The purpose of NeuroDose is to support clinical review of treatment optimization, not to replace clinician judgment. Our initial launch focus is Norway. For Norway and the wider EEA, we are treating NeuroDose as software as a medical device under the European MDR framework. Based on the current intended use, the likely regulatory route is MDR Rule 11, with a working classification of Class 2B. This remains subject to the final wording of our claims and the outcome of the harm analysis. This route would require CE marking through a notified body, supported by Annex 2 and Annex 3 technical documentation. Our regulatory strategy is deliberately disciplined. Define the intended purpose clearly, control every claim, establish the regulated software boundary, and ensure that each clinical output is supported by evidence. The phrase therapy optimization recommendation cannot be used casually. If we make that claim, we must be able to prove it. Now, back to our barrel.
Thank you, Sheris. And yes, in a moment we will return to validation. But before we do, I want you to meet one more person. Brilliant Mona is absolutely a treasure for NeuroNova. And for NeuroDose, that makes her absolutely essential.
Good day. A pleasure to see you. Allow me to introduce myself. Mona Dunnax, Senior Clinical Scientist at NeuroNova Pharmaceuticals, and Clinical Algorithm Designer of NeuroDose. I understand you were seeking insight into the underlying logic of our software. Unfortunately, I do not have a colorful presentation to share, so I must ask your forgiveness. You shall have to direct your attention to me instead. Parkinson's disease is expressed through fluctuating motor control, and therapy response is often visible in 4 high-value domains: the tremor, gait, bradykinesia, and dyskinesia. Together, they show whether treatment appears effective, wearing off, excessive, unstable, or across the dosing interval. Our software uses all 4 Parkinson's motor domains. For tremor, the system evaluates signal amplitude, dominant frequency range, temporal variability, personance, and distribution across the dosing interval. Tremor features are time-aligned with medication intake to assess whether increased tremor activity corresponds with reduced therapeutic effect or possible wearing off. For gait, NeuroDose analyzes mobility-related parameters, including walking speed, cadence, stride pattern, asymmetry, variability, and instability markers. These features support detection of motor fluctuation patterns, as may affect functional mobility and fall risk-related review. For bradykinesia, NeuroDose uses structured movement tasks and sensor-derived motion features to assess movement initiation latency, execution speed, movement amplitude, consistency, rhythm, and task completion characteristics. Changes in these measures are used to identify reduced motor responsiveness or deterioration across time. For dyskinesia, the system evaluates irregular movement signatures, movement excess, recurrence, and timing relative to medication administration. This helps distinguish increased voluntary mobility from possible peak dose not intended movement activity. NeuroDose integrates wearable sensor data, guided movement task results, symptom diary entries, medication timing records. Eleanor McDowell, our lead software architect, our resident mistress of all things software, legal and illegal. The processing logic links medication timing, motor domain changes, symptom fluctuation, data quality, and confidence scoring. The output is a structured clinical decision support profile for clinician review of Parkinson's therapy response. Might you have any questions? Excellent. Thank you most kindly.
Isn't she wonderful? 2 slides left. I promise I will be brief. My people tell me I have a gift for turning 1 minute into 12, and they are not entirely wrong. So let us move quickly through these last 2 pieces of the foundation and talk validation.
When software becomes regulated, device QMS expectations start to shine. Look at the center, the product lifecycle. Around it are the functions that must own evidence: regulatory, quality, validation, software engineering, clinical digital health, data science, cybersecurity, product, and post-market. On the right, you see what device QMS adds: product design controls, software lifecycle records, medical device vigilance, and post-market surveillance. And at the bottom, the governance warnings are very serious. If no function owns controlled evidence, the validation file will fail. If the vendor controls design, but the manufacturer cannot see requirements and defects, supplier control is weak. And if features change without regulatory impact assessment, intended use creep begins. So yes, pharma discipline helps. And this final slide is about competence. Not job title, not confidence, not how beautifully someone says risk-based approach in a meeting. Real competence is the ability to detect weak evidence before an auditor detects it. At the top, you see the ladder: awareness, contributor, reviewer, decision maker, audit defender. Awareness means you understand the language. Contributor means you create controlled records. Reviewer means you can judge whether the evidence is complete, traceable, risk-based, and procedurally compliant. Decision maker means you approve release readiness with documented rationale. And audit defender, that is the rare one. That person can explain the chain calmly under challenge. Intended use, risk, requirements, design, tests. And then comes the expert question. How do we know? And where is the evidence? That question exposes weak requirements, missing risk control tests, open defects without safety assessment, and changes treated as minor when they are not. So when someone says, testing passed, so we can release, we do not accept it. We ask for the evidence chain.
We are done. Hello, sweetheart.
Hi. I can't believe you are making me do this.
There is no one else who knows validation better than Aidan Wenster.
Do they even know what NeuroDose is?
Of course they do. Kurt gave a fantastic presentation.
Kurt did the presentation. Fantastic. Of course. Is there anyone competent enough to share presentation my people sent you?
My team ready to start, but let me be clear. Nothing is ready yet, and it won't be until I say so. Assessment is only the baseline. We are not approving NeuroDose. We are defining the starting validation position before we go into risk, requirements, testing, clinical evidence, cybersecurity, AI and ML controls, and release readiness. NeuroDose processes patient-specific Parkinson's data and produces clinician-facing therapy response outputs. So our starting position is SAMD, and from here, validation will be built as an evidence chain, not as testing at the end. Try to challenge me. Next slide. Our first market assumption is Norway. That puts us under the EEA implementation of the EU MDR framework, with CE marking as the primary route. Most likely, this will involve notified body conformity assessment. Based on the current function, NeuroDose is expected to sit under MDR Rule 11, with a working classification of Class 2B. That is not a trophy. That is a working assumption until claims and harm analysis are locked. The US is not first, but FDA expectations stay visible now. I do not want my people rebuilding the evidence package later because someone in NeuroNova has a planning skills of a raccoon. Next slide. We define the user's Parkinson's patient context, input data, processing logic, outputs, and current evidence gaps. NeuroDose uses wearable data, movement tasks, symptom diaries, medication timing, and clinician observations. Then it applies algorithmic and machine learning logic to generate dashboard outputs for the clinician. That is serious software. I can't believe there are people who don't understand it. Release readiness cannot even be assessed until risk controls, requirements, verification, validation, defect assessment, and post-market controls are defined and traceable. Nothing is being released until my team says it can be released. Next slide. The main gap is simple. The foundation is not controlled enough yet. The intended purpose must be locked. The regulated software boundary must be defined at function level. Supportive outputs must be separated from recommendation outputs. Especially this phrase, therapy optimization recommendation. Before we go anywhere, NeuroNova needs a controlled claims inventory, clear product ownership, defined legal manufacturer, and agreed evidence repository. Without those controls, the validation strategy is unstable, and I will not approve an unstable validation strategy. Thanks, I am done.
Happy?
Absolutely delighted, sweetheart.
Great, I am happy when you are happy.
Who do we have here? Quality and validation, always together.
Kurt Hatcher. Always alone.
Aiden, Robin, hello.
Gentlemen, I trust we are not interrupting.
Hello, my darlings. Looking perfect. Let's get family photo. Welcome to NeuroNova.